Once upon a time, I think all of you need bedtime stories now after a heavy meal, a heavy lunch. So my job this afternoon now is to try to put all of you to bed by making your guests sleepy, and so I need to bore you so you can catch some sleep this afternoon. Now, certainly there are very many students and priests and all who have passed through Rome here will know that the two countries in Africa which are easily mistaken and taking one for the other is Ghana and Uganda. Because when an Italian asks you where you come from, and you say Ghana, say, oh, Uganda. And then you have to correct you and say, no, Ghana. Uganda. So it happens very often. Now, my dear friends, I think I said a lot already in church, so I did not expect to say anything now. It's only to say that the guy, forgive me for calling the Pope the guy. I was going to say the guy who was responsible for all of this, also the Pope who was responsible for all of this, Pope Paul VI. He canonized the martyrs here. And then 5 years after that, he decided to visit Uganda. So in 1969, Pope Paul VI visited Uganda, the first country in Africa he visited. Because now that Pope has a lot of church history behind him. Okay, he'll be the first Pope to begin traveling around. Before Pope Paul VI, popes were not used to traveling around the Vatican or going out of the Vatican visiting countries. Paul VI will start that tradition. From the United Nations, the time he canonized the bishop, the martyrs, he was on the way to India. And then from India, 5 years later, he will be in Africa visiting. And in Africa visiting was again in Uganda. And there he gave one of his powerful speeches, which continues to inspire the church and the bishops of Africa. You know, a Catholic bishop comes to a country where the Catholic Church was strong, but the place he decides to go and celebrate the martyrdom is not in the Catholic shrine where he had canonized the martyrs, but he decided to go to the Anglican shrine to celebrate the event of the martyrdom. So this is a pope also of Ecumenism, recognizing that if the martyrs were both Catholics and Anglicans, he had canonized the Catholics here because he had no right to canonize the Anglicans. That belongs to the Anglicans, right? But when he came to Uganda, the place he went to celebrate the martyrdom was not Namugongo, but was in the Anglican shrine where the martyrs were, memory of them was kept. So this is Paul VI. And then when he met the state, so the government, members of parliament, diplomatic members and all, he started his speech by saying, I think we should start to introduce ourselves to know each other. And this is the Pope speaking, okay? With the parliament and whatever, his person is, we should start introducing ourselves so that you know who we are and that we know who you are. So Paul VI did not take it for granted, although he had canonized martyrs from Uganda. When he came on an official visit, he thought that indeed the government of Uganda may not really know what they're dealing with, so the Vatican. All right? So he began his speech on a note of self-introduction. Let us, know each other. And then he begins by saying, the church does not come to make you and your children alien to your own culture. The church comes rather to confirm and to train and to make your children trained, as it were, upgraded if you want, to be able to render better service to the country. It's a whole long speech that is worth reading. The self-introduction that preceded the speech. And then he went on to give the famous definition of peace, which the Vatican has always used from that point on. He went on to say, development was the new name of peace. Okay, that expression, which now continues to inspire a lot of church's social teaching, was pronounced by Paul in Uganda. Development is the new name of peace. And that just means that if you want peace, you should promote development. Without promoting development, you cannot really pursue and aspire after working for peace and all of that. And then he will turn it around and say, but development also requires peace. If there's no peace in a country, you cannot really get any development going and any development done. So this was Paul VI. And right after, so everything about him began from there. And when he came, you know, I assume I have cut a bit of his story out because I assume you know it, right? You do, no? Then we'll send you to catechism class. You are young. You know, Pope John the 23rd had begun the Second Vatican Council, but he died before it was finished. And Paul VI finished the Second Vatican Council. He stepped in the shoes of John the 23rd to finish the Second Vatican Council. So a lot of the statements in the Second Vatican Council were signed by Paul VI. And one of his things was that recognizing that the Second Vatican Council enabled the church to open its eyes and see that there are a lot of relationships that it needs to have. Before the Second Vatican Council, the church had no relationship with non-Christian religions. The church had no relationship with Protestants. The church had no relationship with the question of migrants and refugees. So right after the council, here in the Vatican, we had an office called Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue, which meant an office to deal with Catholic Church and non-Christian churches. Then he created another office, Pontifical Council for Christian Unity. And that was meant to be the Catholic Church and other non-Catholic Christian churches, okay, to work on the Ecumenism. And then he went on to see that a whole lot of the social issues that were being talked about required attention. And so he created the office, Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace. That's what brought me here to Rome. You know why I say? That brought me into exile. And you are clapping for being in exile. Huh? I'm in exile and they're clapping. So Paul VI created these small, so in the past, you see a lot of pontifical councils. And those pontifical councils were all offices created after the Second Vatican Council to fill gaps which they recognized needed to have some attention. So Pontifical Council for Health Care, Pontifical Council for Migrants and Refugees, Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace, Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue, Pontifical Council for Christian Unity. All of these were done because at the council, the church realized all of these gaps, and they were filled. So one of these is what brought me here in 2010. And then the present Pope decided that there are too many small ones. Let's put them all together. And so 4 councils were put together: Justice and Peace, Health Care, Migrants and Refugees, Humanitarian Assistance, to form what is now called the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development. Okay, so this is now an office made up of the four groups. justice and peace, healthcare, migrants, refugees, and humanitarian assistance. And that is what is there. So the bishops always visit that on their limina visits and all of that, but that is it. Although a lot of bishops have said about how then do we relate to justice and peace? I say it's inside there. So that they knew what we have to do. So my dear friends, all of this is to say that the Pope who canonized the Martyrs of Uganda was a Pope who also did a great page turning for the Catholic Church to make it more relevant to our society, to more relevant to the place of the Church in the world, and more relevant to the gospel proclamation and its announcement. And that is a Pope who now also opened the door to enable other popes to begin to travel outside. That the Church is not just here in the Vatican and in Italy, the Church is all over the world. He began the papal visits, first visiting India, and then he discovered poverty. Then he visited Africa. It's 5 years after that, and discovered a similar situation. So subsequently went to the United Nations, and his big address and speech over there called for development. And that's why when he came home, he created all of these offices to fill up this gap. So the occasion then of Martyrs of Uganda showed Pope Paul VI where to go. He had welcomed the saints here in Rome, but if the Ugandans have made a pilgrimage to Rome, it was to invite him to make also a pilgrimage to Uganda, and that's what he did 5 years after that in Uganda, to just give a great speech about everything. So this being the first visit of a Pope to Africa, I suppose, being I don't know whether there are any non-Ugandans here in this room. I mean from Africa. From Africa. So on behalf of all the rest of us, we just want to thank you for so having opened the pathway for the popes to visit Africa, having shown them how to do so. And we want to thank you for also having given us the first intercessors in heaven on everything that happens to us. The first guys to stand before God and pray for anything happening in Africa were the Ugandan martyrs. They may have been some other saints who preceded them, but as I said, a lot of people have done good things, but nobody has any record of them. Those we have record of, those we talk about. And so I want to thank you for all of this. Thank your government, thank your people, thank the relationship that now exists between government and the Church, and thank you for everything that you do to promote the well-being of people. Thank you and happy feast day.